Is it time yet?
It is time.
We left off at lunchtime, having gone through the first three of the six perfections. And there are usually two ways, there are more, but we'll stick to two ways in which the six perfections can be divided. One way divides them into the first three, which we went through this morning, and the second three, which we're about to go through now. That division is based upon the fact that the first three perfections are necessary in order to achieve a workable higher rebirth. Without generosity, we will suffer terrible poverty. Without moral discipline, we will not be born with human bodies. The karmic cause of being born human is said to be moral discipline. And without patience, we will have no peace in our society, in the society in which we live. The second set of three are said to be the three that are necessary for the achievement of liberation and Buddhahood. And these are diligence, meditative stability, and prajna, or knowledge. Diligence, in the Sanskrit word, is virya, and it has connotations similar to the words virtue in English, and words that indicate strength. A vira is a hero. So virya has a connotation of a kind of strength. Well, what is it? It's defined as gelatro, zungang gelatro wao. It means a delight in doing good things. We think of diligence as forcing ourselves to do something we don't want to do. And I suppose sometimes it has to be that because there are times where we have more enthusiasm than others. But basically, the idea is that through generosity, you develop a kind of spaciousness in your mind, in your heart. And that enables you to be more disciplined, more respectful of others and of yourself. That in turn enables you to be patient. And patience leads to diligence. When I feel impatient, it's hard for me to get myself to do anything. Because when we're impatient, we look for some kind of instant relief from whatever's bothering us. And that's the opposite of virya, or diligence. As with the others, there are three types of diligence. There's heroic diligence, ongoing diligence, and then the third one I can never remember. The first two are very important. Heroic diligence is when you're inspired to do something. Something, whether it's something in the world, or in this case, primarily things concerned with Dharma. You're inspired. Let's say you decide, well, I'm going to do a month's retreat. And the commitment you make to that is heroic. It's above, out of the ordinary. But then every day you have to continue. You have to stick with it. So diligence has an aspect both of initial inspiration, being willing to be inspired, and follow through, being willing to do it. And I suppose it's with the follow through that we come closest to what we normally think of as diligence, which is sometimes you have to make yourself do something. There will be some days, if if you're doing a month retreat where you don't want to do it, and you just have to use the momentum. So one of the things that facilitates diligence is what's called a virtuous momentum or impetus. Habits strengthen over time, bad ones and good ones, and we can use that fact to our advantage. When you get used to doing something good every day, it becomes automatic or natural for you to do it. And then there's the third kind of diligence, which I'm going to leave out because I can't remember what it is. Sorry. And that brings us to a meditation. Meditation is divided, well, the term is dhyana, which is the same Sanskrit word that was translated as chana into Chinese, abbreviated to chan, and then imported to Japan and pronounced Zen. It's meditation in this case means the actual conscious employment of your mind in a chosen way. Now, it is something that we do in ordinary life as well. For example, the mindfulness and alertness it takes me to go through the process of, let's say I decide I want to put my glasses back on, reaching my hand out, grabbing the glasses, and carefully putting them on my head. That's the kind of thing that we do all the time. But that is a natural faculty of mindfulness and meditative stability. So when we practice meditation, we are not trying to learn a skill that we don't already have. We are trying to make proper use of a skill that we already have. Meditation is divided in different texts in different ways. They call it childish meditation, masterful meditation, the meditation that pleases the Sugatas or Buddhas, and so on. But basically, it means what you practice at the beginning of the path, what you practice as you continue the path, and what you practice as a bodhisattva. So, since we're not bodhisattvas, there's not much point in going through the different processes. We're used to dividing meditation primarily into techniques. And in Buddhism, the main techniques are shamatha, or tranquility, and vipassana, or excellent insight, or superior insight. And if you look carefully at all of the different practices that we do, they will either be one of those, the other of those, or a combination of both of those. And there is an aspect of shamatha and hopefully an aspect of vipassana involved in every practice we do, starting with the contemplation of the precious human body, continuing with the uncommon preliminaries such as taking refuge, and of course the main practices of the generation stage, completion stage, and the great perfection. So as Jamgon Lodrötai wrote in The Treasury of Knowledge, regardless of the many varieties, all Buddhist meditation can be summarized into those two techniques. The last of the 6 perfections is pra-nya. And nya means to know, and pra is an intensifier. So it's translated into Tibetan as she rap, best knowing. Again, there are different ways it can be divided. Uh, the most common way is into and I'm going to use the word knowledge for Sherab or Prajna. The knowledge that comes from or is gained by hearing, which includes reading, the acquisition of information. The knowledge that is gained by or comes from contemplation, which means analytically thinking about what you've heard until it's not simply a recollection of the words, but a deeper understanding of the meaning, so that you could, for example, phrase the meaning of what you heard in your own words without using any of the jargon in which you heard it. And then finally, there is the prajna, or knowledge, that comes from meditation. Now, the prajna that comes from meditation can be divided into three, start again. All three can be divided into three in a different way. Mundane knowledge, supramundane knowledge, and supreme supramundane knowledge. Mundane knowledge is the knowledge, if it's a virtue, the knowledge of anything that could possibly be helpful to others. So medical knowledge, scientific knowledge, technical knowledge, artistical knowledge, the knowledge of architecture, the knowledge of sewing and painting and everything you can imagine that could possibly help someone else. That's considered mundane, well, you'll see why. Supramundane knowledge is defined as the knowledge of the selflessness of persons. So it is the knowledge that a Shravaka Arhat has, who has come to a direct and irrevocable recognition that the personal self, an imposition we make on the basis of the five aggregates, that personal self doesn't exist. There is an analytical quality to it, but at some point it is a direct experience. The analytical quality is exemplified by, to use the most famous example, the chariot argument. The chariot is composed of the axle and wheels and the body of the chariot and the thing which you attach the reins to and so on. But none of those are the chariot. That's the argument, basically. So that is applied to the five aggregates in the same way. Form is not the self. Sensations are not the self. Perceptions are not the self. Thoughts are not the self. And consciousness is not the self. And to prove that consciousness is not the self, then there becomes, in the case of the common vehicle, the analysis of time. The fact that while consciousness appears to be an unbroken continuity, in fact, from the point of view of an arhat, it consists of minor cognitive events. That the moments of consciousness, traditionally they're said to have the duration of 1/60th of the time it takes a strong person to snap their fingers. Someone told me that this is similar to the amount of time of a synapse firing in the brain. I don't know if that's true or not, but the principle is similar. So supramundane knowledge is the knowledge that the personal self does not exist. Supreme supramundane knowledge is the knowledge that a Buddha has, and to some extent a Bodhisattva, that not only do personal selves not exist, but objects that are experienced by those selves don't truly exist. Now, arhats recognize that things are not as they seem. They believe that everything that's physical is made up of tiny particles. but they propose the existence of partless, indivisible particles. So according to the Mahayana, there could not actually be an indivisible partless particle. And I can't go further with that because then we get into questions of science, quantum mechanics versus other aspects. And this is, I'm not a scientist, I'm not competent. But that's the way it's normally put. Another issue that is resolved even in the common vehicle is the difference between how things are and how they appear. So, for example, even if I believe in the existence of matter, I know perfectly well that the way I perceive that throne is not something intrinsic in the throne, but is a combination of my eyes, my brain, the amount of light in the room, my distance from the throne, my perspective, the way that the different fabrics and colors reflect light, and so on, all that stuff. That's basic high school science. The question, the thing that would separate some adherents of the common vehicle from what Mahayanists are supposed to believe is the hidden objective basis. Most of us would think, and I have not been able to eradicate my belief in the hidden objective basis as of yet, I'll let you know if I do, is that there's something. I know there's not what I see, but there's a reason, to me, there is a reason why I see that throne there and not there. And that reason, to me, is what is called the Paknamo, or hidden objective basis. Another thing that is refuted even in the common vehicle is abstractions. So, for example, this is a table. We can call it a table because it is used as a table. It was made to be a table. And we all agree that if it were taken apart, its separate pieces would no longer be a table. So there is, conventionally speaking, a table. There's no such thing as table. There is no ideal, there is no generally characterized phenomenon is the technical term, table. Because a table becomes a table when we decide it's a table. If there's a piece of stone out there and people start using it as a table, they're going to start calling it that stone table. If somebody goes out there and they pile up a few stones, thinking of it that it might be a nice bench, but people start using it as a table, they're going to call it a table. So there's no tableness. So this is kind of the approach of the basic, pretty much the basic supramundane knowledge, and then the supreme supramundane knowledge is that of a Buddha's full recognition of the true nature of all things. And since I don't have that, I can't really say anything about it that wouldn't be just horse-pucky. Couple more things, and then we'll have Q&A. I think that, and I often come from this perspective because of my own personal issues and problems. But I think that we can actually look at the development of compassion for yourself and others as overcoming selfishness. When Buddhists talk about fixation on an imputed self of persons, that doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't hurt. I don't feel a pinch. I'm not losing anything. But when someone says to me, you have to overcome your selfishness, then there's a pinch. Because that's what I'm having a hard time with. That's what we're all having a hard time with. Selfishness can manifest in infinite ways. We can learn how to appear unselfish. We can even make a career out of being the unselfish person, have our own YouTube channel, have our own website, theunselfishperson.com. We can do all sorts of things, whatever we feel we need to do in order to impress the people we want to commercially seduce. But have we actually overcome selfishness? That's, to me, the hard question. That's, to me, the hard thing to do. You can say millions or billions of mantras, offer millions or billions of dollars, shave your head and wear funny clothes. You could even build a monastery by hand and still be completely selfish. So the only thing we need to give up, from what I can tell, is selfishness. So if you want to forget everything else we've shared this weekend and just come out of here with one idea that is the definition of compassion for others and yourself, it's overcoming selfishness. Because selfishness is not compassion for yourself. It's compassion for a self who doesn't exist. It's compassion for an illusion, a shadow. All right. The next thing that probably needs to be mentioned is courage. While, as I've mentioned, the dramatic deeds of bodhisattvas are not to be done by beginners. In other words, you don't take the bodhisattva vow and then go in the crossroads of 199 and Route 9 and ask anybody if they need a head, because you'll give them your head. That's the kind of thing that we read in the sutras, bodhisattvas doing that. Hey, anybody need a right hand? And, But nevertheless, there is an emphasis in the Mahayana that kind of needs to be gradually worked on, and that is courage. As Bardor Rinpoche used to almost invariably, when giving the Bodhisattva vow or teaching about the Bodhisattva vow, as he almost invariably would say, a Bodhisattva has three types of courage: courage with time, courage with number, and courage with difficulty. Courage with time means that when you take upon yourself responsibility for another being's welfare, that you have no idea how long that might take until that person becomes a Buddha. And when you take the Bodhisattva vow, you have promised to bring each and every other being to Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes. Courage with number. In some contexts, it's said that there must be a finite number of sentient beings, however large, since beings achieve Buddhahood. According to other texts, it's a little more complicated than that. And that matter is not germane to our Mahayana topic here, so let's just say there are a lot. However many there are, the number is huge. When someone volunteers to feed 100 people for a month, when someone volunteers during a pandemic like this one to put themselves in danger for, let's say, a few thousand people, we admire them, and we should. When someone takes the Bodhisattva vow, they are taking on the permanent welfare of an either infinite or impossibly, incalculably large number of beings. And that means that not only do you take on responsibility for their eventual awakening, it means that to the extent of your ability in a given situation and at a given time, you're taking on responsibility for their immediate needs as well. For example, if you're working as a physician or nurse in a ward where people are seriously ill, your main goal is to cure them, to save their lives and cure them, get them out of there safely. But at the same time, you also want to make sure they're as comfortable as you can while they're still in there. So the courage with number is being willing to take on that responsibility for the immediate and long-term welfare of every single being. And finally, a bodhisattva must have courage with difficulty. Not only does it take a long time to guide any being to awakening, they're not going to make it easy for you. Because they're going to do what they're going to do. Beings do what they do. If we look at our own lives, we've engaged in so much self-destructive behavior at different times. When you take on responsibility for beings, you accept that it's going to be very, very difficult to heal. Let's think of it as healing this extremely self-destructive individual. Every time we think, say, or do something negative, we are being self-destructive. Other destructive as well, but self-destructive. I suppose it's a little bit like being a therapist whose client has infinite defense mechanisms, infinite ways to pervert, subvert, and render ineffective the therapy. They won't listen to what you say. If they even remember it, they'll turn it into a way to increase whatever's wrong with them. If you prescribe something, they either won't take it or they'll abuse it. That's how we are, even with Dharma. You know, we are not easy to guide. You know, to put it in the language of this state, we are real pieces of work. We are real pieces of work. So bodhisattvas know that. And they're not discouraged. They never get discouraged. So courage with time, courage with number, and courage with difficulty. Well, where does all that courage come from? Of course, the sutras will tell us that at some point it comes from the realization of emptiness. But in the beginning, since we're concerned with taking the bodhisattva vow and what ensues upon it, where does it come from? Excuse me. It comes from the recognition of choicelessness. Ultimately, we have no choice. Once you know what you now know, you are already psychologically incapable of getting away with abandoning sentient beings. That's why someone who takes the bodhisattva vow and then decides to be an arhat can't become an arhat. Once you know, once you've heard about this, you realize that it is choiceless. In other words, you won't be happy, not really happy, until you have achieved the ability to liberate others effectively. Because once you set your mind on that goal, everything short of that goal is merely just a side benefit at best, a distraction at worst. So at some point, it becomes choiceless. And in the best cases, that some point is the day you take the bodhisattva vow. But it can take a while. And finally, yesterday, someone asked about those shepherd-like bodhisattvas who paradoxically vow never to achieve Buddhahood until everybody else has. The best known examples of this are Manjushri and Avalokita, or Chenrezig. So it's very hard to say, what are they? When Manjushri was asked, what are you? Because if you read the 8 Bodhisattvas book, arhats are constantly trying to figure out what's the deal with this guy. And the stories are I think they're laugh out loud funny, but it's individual. Manjushri's answer was often, to some people, I am an ordinary being. To others, I am someone who was a Buddha countless aeons ago. To others, I'm a bodhisattva on the path. To others, I am a Buddha, but we will be a Buddha in the future. And then he has a whole list of other ways he can be perceived. And I don't think Manjushri was trying to be facetious. I think his point, and I can't say that I'm quoting him directly because I don't have the book in front of me, but I think his point is that it's impossible for us to totally know or understand. And I'm here. I'm here because of Manjushri, and I don't understand him. He's beyond what I can understand. Every time I try to pin this being that we call Bardor Rinpoche down, I think he's one of that. There's something else. So it's whatever we think we know. It's fine to know something for a while, but be ready for that framework to be exploded and be ready to move beyond it. Any questions? Yes.
So I have one about patience. For me, in terms of like myself, I have pretty poor, most of the time, really poor timing. So like, I always have in my head that I should rush, but like a healthy rush. I feel better doing things under pressure. Well, whether or not, like, for instance, with practice, like if I have the time or I have to do something like later, I feel like I rush that. Even if I have time, I'm still in that mindset of rushing because I'm extremely impatient sometimes. And so, how does one collect all that energy? And of course, patience. But how does one sort of like nullify that energy behind impatience?
Is it because you're overscheduled?
It's because I'm bored. Thanks.
Oh, okay. The easiest way to deal with that is when you first get up in the morning, make a plan. Have a plan for that day. Say, today I'm going to do this, and this. And don't overschedule it. Don't underschedule it. And estimate how long you have to spend time on each thing on your list and try to stick to it. And stuff will come up that you didn't plan on. So always leave room in your schedule for stuff to come up that you didn't plan on. That's my suggestion. Oh, did you have one from the?
Yeah, there's a few from the morning session.
Okay.
In general, even though you eat flesh, this does not prevent you from taking actions that protect some beings. And perhaps this becomes even more critical for those of us that continue to consume animal flesh. Question. Those actions can include donating to organizations which protect particular species as well as ecosystems.
Sure. The traditional term for this kind of imperfect or contradictory moral discipline is in the Kagyu tradition, when they discuss vows and things like that, they say it's like being a rich person with large debts. So just don't think that the one's going to cancel the other out.
I keep hearing and reading references to agency as in authentic agency. What is meant by agency? As I'm hearing it used, except for example in Shantideva's explanation about anger and the stick.
Well, power to choose an action. The stick does not have the power to choose how it is used, as far as we know. The person appears to have the power to choose how they use their arm and the stick they're holding. But that power is somewhat taken from them by the klesha of anger.
Dharma is not fun. It makes you poor unless you're corrupt, and you get no respect. Now I'm depressed. And there's one more comment from the same person. Dharma is hard work, and after 50 years of constant study and practice, still don't understand it.
Yeah. And the question is?
And they comment.
Comment? Well, maybe I'm just a not good at it. It's not fun. There's joy, but there's joy in other things too. I mean, if you go outside, people are enjoying lots of stuff. If you want to have fun, don't do this. Do something else. If you want to reduce stress, get a massage. If you want to go to really great parties, I don't know, become something else. If you want to get rich, do the things people do to get rich. Every choice we make in our lives involves choosing one thing as opposed to others. So if you want to now you can be a bit of a Buddhist. I mean, you can say some mantras every day and still have a full life as a stockbroker. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that the stockbroker, as the mantras penetrate them, is going to find that they want to spend more time saying "Om Mani Padme Hum" than they do watching the market. It gets under your skin. When I first became Buddhist, I thought it was something that I could do maybe 1 hour a day. I thought, I can do that. I was in college and I can, and I had jobs and stuff. I could fit that in. It's not going to ruin my life. And I was at the Dharma Center, what was then Raktrul Rinpoche's Dharma Center in Montreal. And one of the people who hosted the Dharma Center told me about this thing called the 3-year retreat. This was in the 70s, and the first 3-year retreat in what we call Western countries, it was in France, had started in 1976. Hearing about the 3-year retreat, it was like having a knife stuck into my heart. Because I knew, on that spot I knew, damn, I'm going to do that. And I didn't want to. I was an 18-year-old. I wanted to do the things you want to do when you're 18. And 3-year retreat was just not something that I wanted to do. It sounded horrible. And it is. It's horrible. No, it's horrible. Don't ever let anybody tell you it's not. And but I knew. And so then I backed away from Buddhism for, I'd say, between 6 months and a year because of that. Because I knew if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And I don't want to do that. But it had gotten under my skin. So I ended up taking refuge, starting Ngondro, finishing Ngondro, and I was in a 3-year retreat by the time I was 22. After building it, starting when I was 21. And my life was ruined. I had all kinds of ideas. I come from a family of lawyers and journalists. The assumption, I'd always assumed I was going to be a lawyer. That's the way my mind works. That's my background. My uncle was the district attorney of Halifax, Nova Scotia. My grandfather was the attorney general of Nova Scotia. I mean, if lawyers are sharks, it's just, that was I just assumed it. And my whole life was ruined. Now, I think I'm a better person than I would have been as an attorney, but I don't know that. Point is, it gets under your skin and can take over your life. And it's not fun. You know, I would, when I was still in my late teens, I'd take the train down from Montreal to Poughkeepsie and go see the what's now called Palpen Ling. And I remember on the way back, these two slightly drunk women of my age who were returning home to Montreal as well. One of them was clearly hitting on me. And I was single, and I was, 19. So I was definitely interested. And then I mentioned, some topic came up, and I mentioned that I'm Buddhist. Bye-bye. No, So, any ideas you have for having fun, let them go. I'm sorry. I would almost rather lie to you, but I'm not supposed to. Yes.
A question. I'm trying to remember where it started, but when you were talking about, recognizing that things in, I guess, the samsaric world or the samsaric experience are just not acceptable, and then thinking that you want to help other beings, you want to help yourself, and help yourself help other beings. And then we also talked about the bodhisattva aspiration, and then we talked about the ways of actually implementing some of these techniques or intentions. But then later on in the teaching, perhaps today, it was mentioned about the kind of impossibility, the vast countless or unknowable conditions of what we aspire to, that we'll never be able to necessarily fully understand it or grasp it.
Well, I wouldn't say never. I think the Buddha's awakening proves that we can't say never.
Okay.
Let's just get ready for a long, long trip.
So I can't ask how long that is. It'd be pretty stupid.
Well, no, you can. The sutras give different, numbers, and then the Vajrayana gives different numbers. Basically, what they say is, okay, if a long kalpa is the duration of a universe, so this universe is what, 13.4 billion years old, or 14.3, I forget. And we think that we're maybe, let's assume that we're halfway through the existence of the universe. So 14.3 billion years times 10 to the power of 60. That's a novemdecillion in math. Novemdecillion times 3 is the shortest possible. That the Buddha Shakyamuni did it that way because he was a real quick learner. More common would be, let's say, 28 billion, let's just say 30 billion years times 10 to the power of 60. So that's 60 zeros after the 10. Times 37. Those are the figures given in the Mahayana Sutras.
So my question is, like being a parent, a child would always say, "Are we there yet?" and you would say, yeah, we're getting there. It's fine. We're doing fine. And then a little while longer, are we there yet? And yeah, we're getting there. So then after a while, they get tired. They just stop asking. And then eventually you get there. So should we stop asking?
Yes. Yes.
So I wanted to ask about, like, let's say, putting compassion into, like, let's say, mundane life, like, let's say, work. For instance, people who write, let's say, fiction that's, like, really not just the stuff which you see on airports and grocery shops, but, like, something that they put their heart in. Let's say, for instance, Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude.
That's funny that you would mention that. That's one of my favorite books, and kind of the poster book for magical realism.
And like
an excellent portrayal of impermanence. I mean, that's what it is, right?
And like you can just tell that, of course, he's an excellent writer and everything that catapulted him to fame. But like, what that does for, let's say, for me, that really touched me more than just, oh, this is a great book, and it really sort of penetrated my heart, and I really felt like I got so much more of like indescribable benefits
Yes.
from reading that. Is that like mundane compassion, like the higher, something we could?
It's a mixture. I mean, I can't talk about the author's motivation because I don't know. But if you learn from what you read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or whether it's the way the trees move, that's, if it's actually teaching you something, that's called the symbolic guru of appearances. In other words, because your mind is open to the truth, you are actually learning something supportive and helpful. Now, if the question were, should I read 100 Years of Solitude versus spend a weekend doing a nyungne, the textbook answer would be do the nyungne. And my answer would be do whichever feels right to your gut.
I kind of have a question about what you said. When you were like at a certain point, it becomes choiceless. Does that, just I wanted to clarify, kind of indicate that it could be inevitable, like awakening could be inevitable? Because for me, sometimes like a really deep fear that comes up is that like, okay, you've entered the path, and then what if you like go the wrong way, or like what if you like, is it inevitable? Can we take confidence in like it eventually being inevitable, or is it something we always have to kind of really?
Do you mean the inevitability of your Buddhahood or the inevitability of the Buddhahood of all sentient beings?
I was talking, I guess, reaching a state in which you can bring all beings.
So you mean the inevitability of your Buddhahood?
Yes. And I guess both.
According to the sutras, Buddha Shakyamuni, all who have taken refuge in Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings, in any of the traditions that have emerged from them, will achieve liberation during the teaching period of the Buddha Maitreya. Now, liberation may mean that you'll become, well, you can't become an arhat now because you've taken the bodhisattva vow, so, but you will achieve something. And he also said that anyone who even holds up, forget about both palms, but even a single palm in respect to the Buddha and the idea of bodhicitta has at that moment become irreversible from awakening. So it is definitely going to happen, but how long it takes depends upon what you do. And that's true of all of us, of course.
That's good to know.
You're welcome. So we still have half an hour if there are any questions.
I have some coming here.
Okay.
Can you speak more about the unknowability and inscrutability of Manjushri, particularly in the form of Bardor Rinpoche?
No. Because I'm not imagine if the only part of this room I could see were the baseboards, and someone asked me to describe the beauties of this room. It would be like that.
So there are a couple comments, but they asked me to see if I can form them into a question.
Okay.
Yes, I prefer to attend a Dharma teaching than to attend a party or get a massage. Last weekend, I attended a Zoom teaching, Kalu Rinpoche teaching, Niguma Yoga. It blew my mind. That's the yoga that they do in 3-year retreat, so I can't imagine how exhausting a whole 3-year retreat is.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's one more question regarding your answer. Do whichever feels right to your gut. Can you talk about our intuition or inner voice and what role, if any, that can play on the Dharma path?
All I can say is that when I look back at the good choices and bad choices I have made in my life, I always knew deep down that I was making a bad choice when I made a bad choice. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question about.
No, in the back.
Oh, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. I've been kind of coming in line on this question for a little bit, and I wanted to ask you the last question and answer time that I was switching over to. And I'm not sure if it's really a complete question, and I don't know if it's actually more of a complaint.
Okay.
I notice sometimes when we talk about compassion, I notice some students will use certain Dharma teachings almost as an excuse not to broaden their perspective about other suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And it really annoys me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to deal with it skillfully.
Mm-hmm.
So I just sort of stew.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could offer some advice.
I think it's case by case. In my experience with this situation, if I'm not sure that the person would be receptive to my perception. And I'm also not sure that my way of expressing my perception would be helpful. Then I don't do anything because it could make it worse. Sometimes you have to simply let people grow up on their own. And also sometimes, I've misjudged people. I've seen their behavior and listened to what they say and made judgments about them that are subsequently disproven. In which case, I'm really glad I didn't say anything. So it's really a question of what your relationship is with the other person and the level of trust that there is. There seem to be two ways that we respond to even the most well-meant criticism. One is to, regardless of speculating about the critic's motivation, to look to see if there's anything in what they said that might be true and that I can learn from. And the other way is to become defensive and to ignore the possible source of information based on my projection of the critic as having a corrupt motivation. But what I have experienced and learned to some extent, the hard way, is that almost every criticism I have received about my words, behavior, demeanor has had a kernel of truth and information in it that once I get over my defensiveness, has helped me. Is that helpful? That's all I can. Yeah.
The question is, in the English translation that I read, it's in one of the prayers about bodhicitta. It says, "And for those who create bodhicitta, do not destroy it." Can bodhicitta be destroyed, or is that, am I misunderstanding
The word is minyampa, or nyampa mepa impaired. Actually, if you look at the dedication prayers, it's in here.
Yes.
And I don't know, I guess I didn't translate them. I don't know who did. So precious it is. Do not destroy it. Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
In on page 8.
Oh, I know where it is.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't know.
I just don't, to me, I don't understand.
We recite this prayer because it's considered a summary in 4 lines of all the contents of the Bodhicharyavatara by Shantideva. And, essentially, the text is divided into 10 chapters. The first 3 are how to generate or give rise to bodhicitta when you have not yet generated it. The second 3 are about how to protect bodhicitta from impairment. I would say impairment rather than destroy. I suppose it is technically possible to destroy the bodhisattva vow, but if you read the Bodhicharyavatara, it's really how to protect it. And then the 7th, 8th, and 9th chapters are about how to develop it further. And then the 10th chapter is the chapter of dedication and aspiration. So what's contained here is simply those three things. First you have to generate it, and there are several steps to that, which he identifies. Then you have to protect it from impairment. One of the things that involves is studying the infractions of the Bodhisattva vow and protecting yourself from infraction. And we talked about that yesterday or this morning, I think yesterday afternoon. And then is what you can do to nourish it, to increase it. Yeah.
So I just had to write these questions down. So, like, when it came up, like, of course, Dharma's not fun, but like, for me, like, I'm very new, so cloud effect. But I also like doing sometimes like things that most people consider like not fun, but to me they're very enjoyable. So what I'm asking is, when you feel that sense of fulfillment, that enjoyment while you're trying to do your practice, very concentrated, you're trying to really do your best, and you feel that fulfillment and enjoyment. To me, that's kind of fun from a strange perspective.
Yeah, that's fine, but you're not doing it for fun.
Right.
So, for example, when you start to develop meditation, you go through, in different orders, different people, 3 experiences that are apparently positive. One is bliss or pleasure. One is heightened lucidity. And the other one is an absence of thought. The bliss or pleasure comes, well, there are physical things to do with the channels and so on, but basically your mind starts to become, the term is shinjong, which means thoroughly trained. And it's what some musicians call getting in the zone. You get in the zone, and that once your mind is in the zone, then your body becomes pliable. Another translation for Shinjong is pliancy. So as your mind becomes pliant, then your body experiences pliancy as well. And while this may be better than you've ever felt in your life, it might not be. It depends, it's very individual. While this may be better than you've ever felt in your life, once you want to experience that, it's gone. So you can't practice Dharma for fun. It may be fun, but you can't practice it for fun. The second experience, and again, there's no set sequence, is heightened lucidity, where your mind, because your mind is starting to come to rest, it becomes very, very clear, like a lake when all the silt sinks to the bottom and you start to be able to see everything that's in the water. And that may be more clarity than you've ever experienced in your life. So you may think, hey, this is Buddhahood. This is it. This is enlightenment. And clarity can even go to the point where you can literally see through walls. You might be able to actually see what's happening on the corner of Bleecker and McDougal in the village from here. All that clarity can be very extreme. And naturally, because we don't experience that normally, it's not surprising that we might think, hey, I'm really achieving something. It's totally meaningless. All it means is you're learning to meditate. And then the third one is freedom from thought. And that's a state where your mind is still and you're not asleep. You're not unconscious. You don't feel torpid or sleepy or excited or anything, but there are no thoughts. So it's a kind of non-conceptual awareness. And that's the biggest trap for practitioners of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, because that can be mistaken, and frequently is, for the mind itself, or the primordially pure awareness, and all that kind of thing. So those are just experiences. Now, the reason why I say that Dharma is not fun or is not for fun is if you pursue the feel-good aspect of meditation, it creates a dead end. You won't go any farther than that, and then you'll lose that because what caused it was the lack of wanting it, and then so each of these is a dead end in themselves, and have to be. It's like if you're driving along the highway, there are signposts, and sure there are signposts, but if each time you see a signpost you stop driving and you just stay there staring at the signpost, you're not going to get to your destination. It's important when offering people instruction in Dharma to expose hidden faults. I usually use my own hidden faults, and then I might pick on one or two others. But basically, Palchen Rinpoche says the best Dharma is the exposure of hidden faults. And I have loads of hidden faults. Well, they're not that hidden, they're kind of obvious. But I use those because those I know best. But so the tendency to use Dharma for a fun or amusement, people use it to socialize the way they use church. Well, Buddhist socializing is never fun. It's always quarreling. Just over nothing. Nothing to quarrel about here. And it's gone, it's so, why do you think he lives in a cabin out there? We are, yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, to kind of follow on his experience with all this, like nothing happens. It's just like a void, like nothing. It's like you just open a dark room, like as if it's like an infinite room. There's nothing.
That's the experience of the absence of thought.
Okay.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it, but these are just signposts. Don't stop. Yes.
What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with their faith, or maybe lost their faith, or feels like they want to give up?
I think it would depend upon the circumstances, what caused that. Sometimes people can lose faith because they're disappointed by the behavior of, in our tradition, lamas, where they find something out that alarms them. What Bardor Rinpoche used to say about that was, he said that Tibetans had and may still have the advantage of being able to separate the Dharma from specific teachers. So that if you find out that a certain teacher is corrupt, then you go to a different teacher. You have to give up the Dharma. Whereas in the West, we're still comparatively new to this, and we assume that if one Lama is a fink, then the whole thing must be a lie. So that's one circumstance that, can cause the loss of faith. Another thing that can cause the loss of faith is when, no matter how hard you try to practice, you don't seem to be making any progress. And that's basically you're losing faith either in what you're practicing or in yourself. And at that point, sometimes people can either think, I am too dumb or too screwed up for this to work. If that happens, then you simply have to remind yourself that there's no such thing as too dumb for this, and there's no such thing as too screwed up for this. In that case, then you need to go to a Lama or teacher you trust and get into the specifics. That situation is like when, you're put on medication and it makes you sicker. I guess about 10 or 11 years ago, I had restless leg syndrome along all kinds of other problems. And I was put on a dose so low that it couldn't even be therapeutic. It was like the baby dose, so you get used to it. And I took it one night. I had a night of sheer hell. I was like bursting out of my skin, but I couldn't move or I'd get motion sickness. I felt like I had electricity shooting through every nerve in my body, and I became paranoid as well. So I called up my doctor the next day, and she said, well, I guess you probably should stop taking it. And I said, are you kidding? Probably. So figure out what it is that is causing you to lose faith. I have lost faith at times. I experienced a terrible crisis of faith in 1993 because of a scandal that involved where I had been trained. And it caused me to totally reassess my training, my life choices, and yes, my beliefs. And it was really only when I started working more closely with Bardor Rinpoche in the late 90s that I started to begin to recover. And there have been other crises since. I mean, there's going to be stuff, whether it's stuff doesn't work for me or there's something going on externally. So it really depends on what the issue is. Time for one more. Yes.
Yeah, there are no comments. So, I read the Cuts the Bodhisattva Way of Life by Shantideva.
Yeah.
I understood 10% of it. It's some of it is just it takes serious strength to be able to do that. But in my head, even though I don't understand it, I don't get it, but part of me understands a little tiny bit, the little light there. And so I took it, I kind of so is a good motivation is you just trust your gut and you just do it. You don't think about this and that, but if you think it's what's right, it will benefit others. Is that a good motivation just to do it?
It's part of a good motivation. To get the most out of Bodhisattva's guide, Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, I recommend that you read the book, what's it called? The Nectar of Manjushri Speech, which is by Khenpo Kunpal. The Bodhicharyavatara, the guide itself is, while eminently quotable, is very inscrutable in places, especially the 9th chapter, and really requires glossing. And so I recommend that you read the Nectar of Manjushri's speech, which has some wonderful points in it as well, and that are not just explaining the Shantideva, but that give you additional information that is heartwarming and inspiring. And find the translation that goes with it so that you kind of know where you are. There are 6 or 7 translations of the Shantideva in English, and it'd probably be easier to use the one by the Padmakara Translation Committee, who did the translation of the Khenpo Kunpal commentary. All right, shall we? Sonam Deye Tamje Zekanye Tomne Nyebe Ranam Banje Chenga Naje Malam Jobaye Sembe Zole Kawa Roa Soenge Wande Chewo Sanam Yeshe Gyamtso Sanam Yeshe Lama Gyamtso Samne Rinpoche Manje Manam Jejoche Chamba Nyamba Mepada Gone Gondo Bewajo Sanjan Damje Ledan Denjoje Nyanro Damje Amjo Zamba Gamba Zajoba Dela Gwanje Mona Romajo Sanje Regje Zeze Dambe Gar Jarwan Dojja Zamje Mejon Rebe Zangaje Sishe Chonda Jabe Taji. Thank you all.
Thank you.